to be able, Barbados, our people, be able to help make that transition into digital, going into the communities and supporting everyday people in using the technologies and using the services that government is now beginning to put online. We thought, as a ministry and a government, that it should not just be about how people give back, but how we can help use that give back to help them propel forward. The Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, which I have the privilege to lead at this time, introduced a program called DigiRise to our digital ambassadors. And that program not only gave them training in jobs for the new economy, the new digital economy. They were attached to mentors, international mentors, not just local mentors, mentors in major corporations internationally, particularly in the UK. Then some of them were graduated to the opportunity to work. Now, Mr. Brandon Louis is now, that program, DigiRise, ran from October 2020 to February of 2021. 2-3 days a week, they went to the DigiRise support classes, and Mr. Brandon Louis, by the end of that program, is now working for an emerging advertising technology firm of the UK, earning what he says now is more than a comfortable monthly salary. What I find exciting, sir, he is still at university. And so I share this story because I think it epitomizes what it is we are trying to do as a country and as a government in terms of transforming lives, in terms of making sure that what we are doing on the ground, what we are discussing in this appropriations bill and in the estimates and all that our ministries are doing, that they have real impact in real lives at this time. And so I thought, sir, I should start with the story of Brandon Louis, because it really and truly says this is a young man, for the first time exposed, working from right here in Barbados, remotely, and earning a salary from a different part of the world in one of the new areas of technology. Sir, there is much more I could tell on what is happening with transformation, digital transformation in this country, and you would know I will share that because it happens to be the ministry that I am so proud of. But I also want to speak, sir, of some other initiatives that are being supported by the funds that have been requested by this government and by my ministry, and to share with you some of the priorities of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, and a little bit of the distance that we've come. You know, Mr. President, when I look at what is happening on the national stage right now, socially, financially, economically, human beings, how we are impacting lives, I am reminded, sir, of movies being made where if there's a disturbance when the cameras are rolling, there's either an external disturbance or someone forgets a line or misses their cue, the director can say, cut. You can cut, and you can reset, and you can do over. This government has not had the opportunity to do a do-over. we have to say, let the cameras roll. The show must go on. And I said that, sir, because while this country was dealing with the levels of disruption that we have seen in all areas of our lives, education, in health, in schools, in the workplaces, all across Barbados due to the COVID pandemic, the government, and I'm talking about the public servants, the bureaucrats, have continued to work. And they have continued to work in areas of priorities that were our priorities before as a government, as established in our manifesto, as were the priorities that continue throughout 2020, that year, and that continue to be priorities as we, in our estimates of expenditure going forward. And if you would permit me, sir, I just want to share a little bit with you about how they have allowed things to keep going. Many of you would be familiar about the Easy Pay platform, which is the payments platform of government. Significant work has been done by the people of this government, and I say of government because much of the work that has been done by MIST has not been done alone. It has been done in collaboration with ministries, departments, and agencies, but I want to commend the work that we have been able to achieve in collaboration with all of government. And permit me, sir, indulge me just a little bit, because I want to show how the show still went on. We did not stop. We couldn't cut and say do over. We just had to say, let us continue, and let us continue to build back better, as you hear. During the COVID pandemic, just after, you would have, actually it was just at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we were able, through government's payment systems, sorry about that, sir. You see there was a disturbance, but you see the show still must go on. We still must continue. In January of 2020, the police certificate of character went digital. We moved online. In March of 2020, business name registration through KIPO, those applications and payments went online. In May, a number of international business payments, and there are numerous ones, corporate and trust service provider applications, the registration of trust applications, the renewal of grandfathered entities, a whole range of services from international business, those too went online. In June, driver's license renewal went online. Now we know that still, if you are a brand new driver with a brand new license, if you're over 70 and if you're non-nationals, you still have to do something different. You still have to go to the licensing authority, but we're working on those solutions. We solved for the majority, and we will then solve for the others as we go forward. But that was in June. In July, you were able to do insolvency services and make searches and do certain payments online. In July, pilots' licenses, whether it relates to airport or aerodrome certification, aircraft worthiness, pilots, a range of services, again attached to civil aviation, went online. In August, the welcome stamp fees, we went online in collaboration with the Ministry of Innovation, the Barbados Tourism Authority, and others who were a part of that initiative. In August, it's very interesting. Some schools have chosen to put their school fees online. One such school is St. Michael's. And I know there are people in here who are seeing. So you have, even in the schools, are seeking to get online. In October, TAMIS payments went online. In January of 2021, just a couple months ago, sir, medical cannabis licensing fees. In February, just passed, we had nurses' annual registration fees. In February of 2021 as well, 15th, medical practitioners, doctors, can now renew their licenses online. That is including Dr. Walcott and others like him. Town planning, sir. There are now some services from town planning that are now online and can be paid via Easy Pay. We have not completed all of them, sir, but the ones that are on are the formal applications, the Chattel House application, and the Trees application. We know that coming online will be the certification of compliance, building starts application, and revised. Those are to come. But the first three are already there. Sir, I could continue and tell you about the 47 other professional licenses to practice that are now payable online. And I share this, Mr. President, to let you know that even though COVID had disrupted this government, the public servants of this government, as well as the political directorate of this government, we never said cut. We never stopped. We simply kept rolling. And I want to give my compliments to all of the people in the various ministries, including my Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, who led a number of these initiatives, for their commitment during the time. They were not on the front line, but they have definitely kept Barbados on track for digital. Mr. President, yesterday, I believe it was or day before it was, I believe it was Senator Drakes who asked about the Barbados Tech Accelerator and what that was and what it meant in the context of this appropriations bill and the estimates attached thereto. Sir, the Barbados Tech Accelerator is an innovation initiative. We have asked about innovation. We have said we need to bring more innovation into the public service. But as we all know, there are entrenched processes and ways of doing things that have in many ways hindered our ability so to do. The Barbados Tech Accelerator is intended to bring innovation into the public service. And how? Traditionally, sir, you would have government with a problem that needs to be solved, either for government or within government. And oftentimes we would rely on the public servants to come up and find ways to solve it ourselves, or we had certain types of procurements that made sure that those who did were the ones who were chosen, and those who were now coming up with innovative ideas may not necessarily have received the level of attention as those who have tried and proven situations, even when they're not ideal for the situation. And so we have brought the Barbados Tech Accelerator, which we are in the process now of setting up as a limited company, that will be able to look at what are the problems within government or for government, where we identify those problems, we turn them into public challenges, and then we invite technology entrepreneurs and others from the public, civil society. You can come in as an individual, you can come in as a group, you can come in as a company, any which way you choose, that you can then seek to submit proposals for how you would be able to solve this. But it is not just a paper proposal. You actually have to build out a solution that can be tested and implemented. And through a transparent process, sir, I will not go into all of the details now, but there is a structure that will be revealed. Through that structure, you are then able to have a competition. And that company, individual, whoever it is who wins that competition gets the opportunity to implement it in the particular and provide the solution. And so it is moving all the way from here is the problem to solution. And the intention, when the right policies are in place, is to then move them to procurement. So that when we talk, as Senator Nurse talked 2 days ago about procurement and leading for reform in procurement. Here is one way in which we might be able to link innovation to government procurement to bring greater innovation into the public sector. The intention too, sir, is to link such innovations that will come out of the tech accelerator to export. Many of the problems that Barbados needs to solve for government or in government are problems that others are facing elsewhere. The opportunity then for us to be able to take those solutions that work for us can then be linked to exports in that significant way, again, to feed that new economy and the new way of finding growth away from some of the non-traditional ways. That is also a significant linkage that will come from this. And the winners will receive the Prime Minister's Innovation Award, which goes towards providing some support for them to be able to move to the next level. Up to this morning, at 8 o'clock this morning, I was meeting with a number of technology innovators who are seeking to work with our ministry to help move the tech accelerator forward, to create a technology association, and to be able to truly bring some expertise that we need for the long term at no additional cost to government at this particular point in time, and no favor. Sir, it is initiatives like these that feed into the transformation that we're seeking to make happen in Barbados and for Barbados. And again, when we look at the priorities for the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology towards that same digital transformation, I want to share what we are doing with the Digitization Center, government's first ever Digitization Center. And I heard one of my colleagues on this side speak about the SSA building in Vaucluse in St. Thomas. This government has determined that regardless of what were the circumstances surrounding it, that we now as a government need to be able to better utilize what we have. And it is our intention at this time to do our best to make as that former SSA building, to turn that into the Digitization Center for all of government. Implementation will be done over a period of time. In other words, it will not be at full capacity immediately. We will initially start with about 20 persons digitizing, and then we will scale up so that by the end of this year, that digitization center should be at its full capacity of close to 200 people. What has held us back and what is keeping it, there are protocols in place that requires that we have certain distances, that requires that there be a way in which people flow in and out of the building, that there's a way in which records can be transferred, and all of the COVID protocols that must go around that. And as a result, we have decided to start with a smaller number of people, make sure that we have all the systems working properly before we start to scale up. And so that we expect, right now, the Ministry of Housing is working on taking care of some of the shortcomings that I heard mentioned by one of my fellow senators yesterday with regards to the carpets coming out. There were some issues with regards to some other parts of the infrastructure that are being addressed, and we are seeking to make it fit for purpose and suitable and safe for our people now to go and work in that building. Sir, so far, when we talk about digitization, again, this government never stopped, even with disruption. So far, we have digitized close to 400,000 records, and we expect that we will have reached the 1 million mark by the end of this year. We already have a schedule, sir, of those ministries, departments, and agencies that are ready. Because remember, it is not just a matter of picking up records and digitizing them. You have to clean them. You have to inventory them. You have to do significant preparatory work before the records can themselves be digitized. And we have developed a readiness document, which we will be distributing to the rest later on, so that you know, should you wish to have your records digitized as a government agency, you must fit these criteria, or these are the things that need to have been done ahead of time. And so we expect, sir, that as the digitization center gets going, that we will be able, sir, to move apace as we bring on more and more ministries, departments, and agencies to have their records digitized in a responsible and significant way. Sir, when you digitize records, you don't just take them and put them nowhere or anywhere. We are seeking to roll out an electronics documents and records management system, which would be the electronics platform that you would use when you have digitized records. And we're seeking to use the same thing across government so that it is easy. It is easy for them to be compatible and for us to search and be able to draw as we need to do. Currently, the electronic documents and records management system we're using is being tested in the Ministry of the Public Service. And in fact, we anticipate that that testing period, that piloting period, will be completed by the end of this month, and that we will then be able to scale up and move apace with that. Additionally, sir, again, talking about digital transformation, being able to put the citizen first, making sure that indeed we are rolling services out that the public can indeed consume, and that we do so in as safe a manner as we can at this time. The e-services platform of government will soon be launched. And what is that exactly? Right now, we have many different services being offered, many different places, online and otherwise. The e-services platform is that single platform. You go through one portal to get to government services. There'll be a directory of all of the services that are delivered by government. You're able to click on that service, and then the e-services platform then will be able to deliver to you. The intention is that from end to end, which means from beginning to end, whether it's from your application, your registration, all the way to payment and receipting, would eventually become a part of that platform. We are not there yet. The platform is now being built. The infrastructure is being put in place. And the company that we're working with is an international company, but it has local partners. And what is exciting about this is that as part of that collaboration, we ensured that there was transfer of knowledge to Barbadians. And so far, there have been about 20 people who have been trained in how to put new services on that platform as they come available. And we will continue to ensure that we're, at least for the initial part of getting the technology and getting the expertise, we may have to partner internationally, that international partnership also comes with a transfer of knowledge. That means we are building our local capacity to be able also to do for ourselves. Sir, we expect that by the end of this year, sir, and perhaps much sooner than that, you will be able to apply for your passports online. The liquor licenses, which were delayed somewhat, the legislation is now been sorted out by that ministry, and we are now seeking to collaborate with the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship to be able to put all of your liquor licenses and a number of the other licenses related thereto online. Again, not all at once, but bit by bit. Additionally, the police certificate of character, which is now in one environment, will be moved over to the e-services environment, and we will be able to have an even more seamless process in dealing with that. And as the years go by, we will continue to add more services. And I want to share that because there are a number of people who have said, but what about this service? Well, this over here needs being done, and that over there needs being done. The truth is, we wish we could do all at once. But understand that every service that comes on needs the resources, not just to put it on, but to be able to maintain it. You need the financial resources, you need the human resources. And in those respective ministries, departments, and agencies, you need to have the technical people there who can actually manage, because MIST can manage many of these things, but we also need to make sure that there is expertise in the various ministries, departments, and agencies to be able to manage the services and take care of the technology side as well as the customer side. And we also need to train the people who will be able to move it. So yes, thank you for your encouragement, for all of you who are saying, what about this and what about that? We are getting there. But understand that we have not only to put the technology in place, we have to bring people along with us. And that takes just a little bit longer, because it is not just technology management, it is the entire gamut of change management that is a part of what we are doing at this time. Sir, and with all of this transformation, I know I have heard, we are hearing the public scream about telecommunications and the fact that it is the highway across which all of this must happen, and that the quality of service is not always what we would like it to be. And I am telling you that the telecommunications companies, we have, as a ministry, been speaking with the telecommunications company, we've been having conversations, and we have put certain initiatives in place. I have heard some people who are living in the St. Silas area, some areas down in Orange Hill, are saying that they have got somewhat improved service in certain areas. It is because there was some collaborative work that had to be done by some of the telecoms companies. Some of them are co-located in locations, so there's one place where you will have the apparatus for both companies. And they have been able to resolve some of the issues that was causing interference and perhaps less than ideal service to many of the people. Right, there were about 35 of those sites across Barbados, between 34, 35 sites across Barbados where those companies were co-located, and they needed to put certain equipment in place to make sure that they weren't interfering with each other's signals, which would then interfere with the public signals. And all 35 of those locations have now been addressed. We understand also that there's still significant work, investment that has to be made in order to bring the quality of service up. And the cabinet has given permission for us so to go forward, and we are going forward. The Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, under which telecommunications falls, we are moving with the Fair Trading Commission to be able to ensure that proper standards are set that not only deal with the technical side, but also will deal with the customer service side. So we are hoping to be able to move to those standards, because the truth is, unless people are held to standards, we may continue to get what it is. And I think that the telecommunications companies are very well aware, and I think that they understand that we need to do better in terms of our telecommunications. And even as I say that, sir, I want to thank the same telecommunications companies for the support that they gave to Barbados, the government of Barbados, during this COVID pandemic. They have zero-rated a number of the sites so that if you need to call or you need to reach out, you do not have to use up data on your phone. It doesn't cost you to do so. They have sought to make certain sites for education, for health, and others available. And in our recent Seek and Save program that was headed by the honorable the honorable senator on my left, more than 400 phones. How much was it? 150? How much? How much? Just over 400 phones were supplied by our telecommunications companies to help in that effort. In addition, For the police who also had to do some of the compliance monitoring, etc., phones were provided to them by our same telecommunications companies to be able to do that. And in many cases, they provided not just the equipment, but they also provided the data that was required. And so, to both of our major telecommunications companies, Flow as well as Digicel, this government of Barbados says to you, thank you. But in the area of telecommunications, it is not just connectivity that matters. It is access. You would have heard Senator Springer, you would have heard others speak about the fact that we have people across Barbados who either cannot afford or who, for whatever other reasons, are unable to connect to telecommunications in order to work, in order to go to school, and to do the other everyday things that so many people take for granted, and that there will be a widening of the digital divide if we do not seek to address this. I am not in a position yet to say that it is done, sir, because the Cabinet of Barbados would still need to approve. But we are seeking to move towards a new definition of universal access that includes not just the right for people, no matter where they are, that's what we're talking about, universal access, no matter where you are in the country, that universal access not only relate to telephony, but that equally it relates to internet access. I will say no more on that at this time because I must await. I cannot preempt the decisions of the Cabinet of Barbados, and I will certainly be soon taking that paper there to get their approval. In addition, we have to say, well, if we're going to give universal access, how does it work? Within the Telecommunications Act, there's already still a provision for a universal access fund. And we will be seeking to see where we can move with that to ensure that we're able to do for this country. So when we talk about transformation, it is the lives of the Brandon Louis that we are talking about. It is the basic connectivity issues of telecommunications. It is the nuts and bolts of digitizing records. It is the reality that there are analog processes that must now be brought into the 21st century. It is being able to put Barbados in a position to digitize at scale using digitization centers. It is about e-services, making it affordable, making it easy, making it accessible, making it efficient for people to be able to use services, and in doing all of this, be able to transform their own lives and contribute to the economic well-being of this country in a new digital economy. Sir, there is much more that I could continue to say, but sir, I suspect that I am perhaps coming closer to my time.
Press on, Senator.
I would say, sir, that
we are so happy to hear about how you have the ease of doing business.
And sir, I know that there are some other issues that Barbadians are concerned about, and I trust that I will be able to come back at a later time and share with this honorable chamber and Barbadians more of what we are doing with regards to cybersecurity, because of course the reality is we cannot stop persons from seeking to do what they ought not to do. We are not able to stop them in our real lives. We are not able to stop them in the virtual world, etc. And government has a responsibility to be able to protect the personal data as well as to protect the infrastructure of this country in significant ways. And as I said, I know that I am coming to the end of my time. I will speak to this further, but I want to say that the Identity Management Bill, which will underscore what we're doing with our National Digital ID, we passed that bill in here. There are definite improvements that can continue to be made to the Act, and we will be on a path of continuous improvement in terms of making sure that that Act is reviewed and continues to evolve and become even better for us. The Data Protection Act, which I know a number of people have asked about, it was passed. I took a paper, Cabinet has now approved the proclamation of that, and we expect that that proclamation will be done in very short order. because the approval of the cabinet has already been done and the necessary papers have been signed by the Attorney General. It is now just a matter for a name which I cannot mention in this honorable chamber now to move forward, and once properly approached through the process that is necessary to sign what is necessary. And we are proclaiming the Data Protection Act with the exception of the areas that require regulations. The reason why we are doing that, and people will ask why, it is because it was our intention that the Data Protection Commissioner, once in place, would be an integral part of helping to create those regulations at the time. The Ministry of the Public Service has already, through the, I believe it's the Judicial Commission? Yes, pardon me? Yes, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission has already gone through their selection process, and we now need to make sure that the act is proclaimed so that that selection can now legitimately take up the post of the data protection. So we are getting closer. We did not stop, sir. We have continued to do the work. We wish it had been done sooner, but indeed we are happy that we are getting there now. In addition, we understand that cybercrime is a major issue that is an important part of the cybersecurity landscape, and the Law Reform Commission, which is headed by, I believe, Sir David Simmons, that Law Reform Commission will be looking at cybercrime. We now have the Computer Misuse Act, which we know needs to be repealed and replaced because we can do better, and we will continue to improve our legislation and all that it will take. Now, there are other pieces of legislation that will be coming through this honorable chamber at some point, and I will not go into all of them now, but they are all part of ensuring that we create the kind of environment in Barbados where, as we make the transition to digital, people are feeling a little bit safer. And while we cannot stop bad actors from behaving badly, we can certainly put the laws in place to make sure that we catch them, and when we catch them, that there is a consequence that is significant. Sir, I just wish to divert at this point before I conclude with the National Digital ID. I recall, sir, and I was asked to respond to some of the issues that were raised by some of the other senators on certain matters, and there's one in particular that I wanted to respond to, that I've been asked to respond to. It is that of the National Cultural Foundation. I believe it was Senator Drake's that raised whether or not it would be repurposed and restructured, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if you would read the estimates document and see where there are some significant changes that have been made, you recognize that that agency has not simply been about events, the crop over and the NIFCA. They have been doing significant other work for a very long time in the development of artists, in training, in doing tremendous work in the communities, in the schools, as well as locally locally and helping artists to find their way internationally in a significant ways. And I think if we have been paying some attention, sir, we would recognize that one significant adjustment that we have seen is that much of the art has now gone digital. We now have digital galleries. We now have all kinds of activity that was once live that is now in digital form. And I am told by the National Cultural Foundation that they're continuing now to find opportunities for our culture to be exported in significant ways using digital platforms. Now, I will leave the Cultural Foundation to be able to expound further on that, but I thought that I ought to share the misinformation, perhaps of some, that it is just events that the National Cultural Foundation does, but there is significant artist development work and exposure work and business development work that is also done as part of the National Cultural Foundation. Now, I said that that was a diversion, and I will conclude, sir, with the National Digital ID, which is that piece that will underpin our ability to bring a number of services to the people of this country. I know many people have been hearing little bits about it. You're going to hear more in the coming weeks about the National Digital ID. I spoke about it in here when we did the Identity Management Bill, so I will say two very short and brief things. One, there are two aspects to the National Digital ID. There is the smart card, which I believe will be unveiled in due course. It is already done. It is here. I have one not far from me. But when it is unveiled officially, I shall not step in front of others whose place it might be better to unveil that card. So there's one aspect, which is the smart card, which you can take and you can use the same way you use your current card, or you can now use it to access certain digital services that will be available. And then the other piece from the smart card is the actual services that you will be able to access, including being able to be authenticated as who you truly are when you're online, not just in person, and then being able to access a number of services simply because you are able to be authenticated online. I am going to give far more detail on that over the coming weeks, and some of you will be seeing, some of you, and I will speak to that too as well. And I think I spoke to that when we did the Identity Management Bill. Mr. President, sir, the Honorable Senator on the other side was talking about fingerprints, sir, and did not in any way mean to disrespect you by referring directly to him. But it is something, and sir, if I may, Mr. President, just give that the attention that it deserves. Many people have been concerned about fingerprints. I believe I explained it in here before, but you know what? It bears repeating again. And I am going to make it as simple as I can. Your fingerprints are not being stored on the card. What is actually happening is when you give a scan of your fingerprint, it is hashed, meaning scrambled up. Think of scrambling eggs. It is scrambled. What is actually being kept is the scrambled. There is no way, kind of like when you scramble eggs, to unscramble it and make it back into the original. Then when you go back to have yourself verified through using the fingerprint, again, they take the scan, but it is scrambled, and it is scrambled to scramble that is compared, never the original print. So in that regard, and we, through the technology, it is called a one-way hash. And through that technology, we have no way of reconstructing the original. Not at this point in time. And so I'm saying to you, and it is not the policy of this government indeed, and I want to make the point, Mr. President, that in the first place, we do not need your fingerprints in order to authenticate. We do not need them. So they're not necessary at all. They came into play. And I remember saying it in this honorable house because when we had our consultations with persons with disabilities, many of them who cannot write and for various reasons were unable to sign, they asked whether or not there would have been an alternative. And so it was not this government's policy. We do not need them. And so it is a choice of people if they want to provide them. And again, I heard the story saying out there that there was, you are obligated to provide them and you're being made to feel badly for not. We use an opt-in approach, which is the standard, is the best in practice approach, where we don't say you have to do it, but then you have to opt out. In other words, if you don't want to do it, you then ask not to. We do not do that. We use the opt-in approach. You have to say you want it in the first place. And so, and I'm glad to hear you. I'm glad to hear the Honorable Senator Franklin say that he wants to have his fingerprints on. I'm sure this entire chamber heard him say that.
Yes, I heard him.
So indeed, sir, I really am happy that we have cleared up the matter, and I hope we have cleared up the matter on fingerprints. One, it is not required. Two, if you choose to, you opt in to do it. And once you do opt in, we use a hash. Your original fingerprint isn't stored anywhere in the system. And once it is hashed, we have no way of rebuilding it. So I hope that in somewhere clears up the matter. There were others who had raised certain questions of biometrics. Biometrics are things like, facial recognition. It's also your fingerprint. It's also retinal scans, etc. Our smart card will not be using any other biometric other than, it requires no other biometric other than your photograph, for facial recognition. And that's the same thing that exists on your passport. It exists on your current ID form, on your identification card, the laminated blue one. It exists already on your driver's license. So we are introducing nothing new. And so I understand the concerns of many out there, but I just wanted to share with you, Mr. I just want to share with you, Mr. President, that we are, I just want to share with you, Mr. President, that, there is nothing nefarious, there is nothing significantly different than what you would have provided before, and for those things that we are taking due care. There was another question that was raised with regards to whether your health information will be on the card. The answer to that is no. When I was in this chamber the last time when we dealt with the identity management bill, I believe the identity management bill, I mentioned to you 3 things about this card. It's what's on it that you can see, it's what's in it that's in the chip, and it is what is accessible by it. At present, there's no direct linkage to medical information. And when that time comes, because we have the capacity to make that linkage at some later state, it will be done with the proper safeguards in place. Again, I cannot go into that right now because we have not yet started to work on that aspect of it, but it is important, and I think it is necessary for me to say that no, your medical information will not be on it, and it will likely be something that's accessible from a different database that you will be able to use it. But at this point in time, no, that is not one of the features. And when that feature comes on board, we will take the time to explain to you in as many ways as we can. Mr. President, I believe I have now reached the end of my time, and I am getting quite the eye from my honorable senator right here. I trust, sir, that in this contribution to this honorable House, that I have been able to demonstrate in some ways what are some of the priorities that we will be focusing on in the next financial year, and how we can see, and I've given practical examples as well as general explanations for how we may be able to move this process forward. With these few words, Mr. President, I beg to, I thank you for the opportunity to make this contribution.
Thank you very much, Senator. I thought for a moment you were making a special digital ending. Thank you very much for helping us with the ease of doing business. Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, okay, we're on. Sir, I think there have been some wonderful submissions over these 3 days during this appropriations bill debate, and the fact that Senator McConnell is very worried about time doesn't surprise me. We've had quite a few senators, I think, beg you, try to cajole you, and in the case yesterday of Senator Holder, simply charm you into awarding more than their allocation of time. And often I've remarked that people stand up and they say, I'm going to be brief in my remarks, I won't detain you long, and many minutes later, their contributions are concluded. But I can guarantee today I don't want to stand between hungry senators and the lunchroom, and I'm not going to take a great deal of time. But if I started off talking about how people have wanted to speak perhaps a little excessively in terms of of the rules. It's because I consider that a sign that all of us in here, without exception, love this country and want this country to work better. That we want it to come out of this pandemic, not just as standing up and tottering and surviving, but actually in a better place, on a foundation that we can build and expand on. So whatever our views, one to the other, of what has been said, I think the important factor to remain is that we're all in this together. I'm going to return to that because I think that's a theme that Senator, Minister of Tourism Cummings led off with, not us and them, and was picked up also by Reverend Rogers in a unique argument, I thought, that we're all in this together. So I start there, and I salute many of the contributions. I think whether we've spoken about when it comes to the matter of tourism, things like who owns the assets, or whether, and I'm sorry that Senator Boyce is not here, because I would personally congratulate him on reaching beyond the sphere of the law to talk about things like pro-cyclical policies and contra-cyclical policies. I don't think I heard him talk about a-cyclical policies, but that can be the next chapter that you might care to look at. But even as we talk about those things, as we acknowledge on both sides of this chamber that the government has performed strongly both before and after the start of this pandemic. And that's an important point, because pre-COVID in 2019, our fiscal performance was so strong, admittedly in the pursuit of reducing debt, but it gave us a very, very handsome budget surplus that in fact, sir, has served in 2020 to preserve the way of life as we know it in this country. And I think we have to acknowledge that we've been buying time a little bit, but we couldn't have done that without what happened, without the performance in 2019. I wanted to make a contribution, sir, I acknowledge the expertise of people who've looked through the estimates. They know all the heads. They've made an analysis. I think that's valuable. But it strikes me that there are some variables that are not in our command to wield as we'd like them to. There's some levers we can't pull at. And there are things that we need to happen, but we can't do it alone. And the first of these, sir, is demand. We need a return of demand for our goods and services. No matter how efficiently or effectively we marshal our resources, we move things around, if we don't get that demand, we're going to be in trouble. And that demand really means tourism. And it means we need a decent winter season. And even as we transition from a shorter term stay profile to trying to attract people who would like to stay longer, it's still going to boil down to having a tourism season that brings in some revenue, that represents some demand, that gets us back on an even keel. Until we get to that point, we're treading water, and you can't do that indefinitely. Now, Senator Cummings, I thought, made a clarion call, as I referred to earlier, for solidarity. It's not us and them. Now, we know tourism is critical for us. We're not always happy with the way it's structured. We know, for example, when we see the reaction to the BEST program, if everybody is unhappy, workers and hotel owners, I think we're probably doing something right, because a compromise really means that nobody is truly happy. Every side has given. So as upset as we may be about history and who owns what and how we're doing, we need tourism. Even as we work on diversification, we need some demand to come through. And this is not something we can easily generate ourselves, but we can prepare the ground. And this is what the government is trying to do. And it's the exemplary work, I think, of, in my view, and many other Barbadians, of Minister Cummings, to make that so. The second element, sir, that's not in our control up to a point is vaccines. Now, I suppose, like many of us in here, I'm part of a WhatsApp group, old boys, old Arizonians who are in there, and it struck me the other day that some of them are very keen that the government do as much as it can to secure vaccines. We don't always know all the details of what is going on in the halls of government and what the government is actually undertaking. But I would suggest that for those who haven't done so, pick up a newspaper or two, an international newspaper, and look at what is happening across the globe. Look at the hoarding that's going on both in the EU and the United States. The United States, which is sitting on a hoard of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines that it hasn't even approved for use yet, but it's still hanging on to them. It's given some to Mexico and Canada, but otherwise it's still hanging on to them. People are scared. They don't want to share. In the EU, 27 or 26 nations now, they were so obsessed with securing the vaccines at the cheapest possible price that others who were prepared to pay more got in front of them. And now they're actually talking about changing the legislation to have export bans to these people who paid more money in order to keep those doses, again, of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for the most part. Within Europe, there was a story 2 days ago, I think, where the discovery is termed that way of 23 million doses in Italy being prepared for shipment is being blocked by EU. EU members are at one another's throat to a certain extent in this matter, and they do not want to give to others. And I should say, when I use the word give, I mean deliver, because these things are, in our case, they're not gifts. They're doing everything, including the use of the law to block what would be completely normal, legal, and natural justice in normal times. So when we look at our performance in securing vaccines, I think we have two things to be thankful for. One is that the Prime Minister exploited her personal brand and charisma and really was able to reach out and get 100,000 odd doses in the first instance from the Indian government. But we also need to thank the Indian government because that's part of a larger vaccine diplomacy, the Pt1 vaccine diplomacy that they've undertaken. And in fact, they've given away over 8 million doses to about 35 countries, I think, as part of their program, and almost 60 million commercially in total to about 71 countries. So those two factors we have to be thankful for. Now, it's fairly widely known, I think, that we have placed orders for vaccines, hundreds of thousands of doses. We've paid, but we can't control delivery. That's out of our hands. Though those two factors, these vaccines and demand for our goods and services, are things that, as hard as we might wish it so, we're dependent on others. And it's very important when we look at these appropriations in this bill that we recognize that. In the meantime, what we can do is focus on those things that will help us drive growth when the situation normalizes, or at least shows some semblance of normalcy. And I've contributed here before and spoken about the drivers of growth. And the way I class it, there are different ways of talking about it, but you have policies and initiatives that promote productivity. So we've just heard from Senator McConney about digitization, national digital ID, and so on. These are often overlooked but critical initiatives that save time, and reducing time drives increases in productivity. And just yesterday I saw, I'm sure Minister McConney is aware of this, but I saw IMF, I'm going to have to read some of this because it's in IMF speak, but I saw an IMF press release that spoke about the EGDDS, which stands for the Enhanced General Data Dissemination System. I'm reading from their press release. It does something. It supports improved data transparency, encourages statistical development, and helps create synergies between data dissemination and policy making. I think in layman's language, what that means is it produces a single source of data which can be looked at in almost real time so policymakers can make informed decisions using a single data set. I think for policymakers to hear that is quite impressive. It's being hosted by the Barbados Statistical Service. And we will know, I think in a few years ago, there was a debate about who owns the rate of unemployment, that number. Well, now I hope that this EGDDS system does something to improve that situation and drive further productivity and more informed policy making. A second element that you can detect in these estimates that is aimed at either driving growth or creating the conditions for growth is capital formation. You know, for people or companies to invest, they have to have the capital to do it. And with capital, you can embark on construction programs or infrastructure or on softer, I would say, digitally driven initiatives also. And when we talk about capital formation, sometimes we really overlooked that there are two sides to it. One is the spending, and the Prime Minister has spoken lately about one-off capital projects specifically designed to drive employment, which is the third element of growth, and I'll come to that in a moment. But how do you finance some of this? Well, fortunately, we have joined up economic policy making. So when we produce a bill, act like the BOSS Act, Barbados Optional Savings Scheme, it is in the knowledge that that is going to generate some income for the government that can then be put into capital projects to drive growth. And so this is the third element that I touched on, employment. This crisis has shown us that in the absence of any action, the very economic superstructure of the country is in danger. If a sufficient number of people lose their jobs in key sectors and you do nothing to either preserve those jobs or create new ones, it's very hard to come back from that. Because not only do they lose their jobs, but the businesses themselves will fold up, and you can't just turn it back on like a light switch. It's not something that you really want to be faced with, starting from scratch, the rubble of whatever the pandemic leaves behind. So programs, again, I mentioned it, the best program that nobody is 100% happy with, but everybody is pleased that they've got something from it. And that may be a slightly unfair characterization, but it preserves jobs and it helps hotel owners, whatever we think of that ownership structure, stay in business. So we don't find ourselves in a position where we have no infrastructure when tourism demand comes back. And I have no doubt that tourism demand will come back. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. And I think people will not forget that they love to travel and visit other places, other countries, especially ones as well run and as beautiful as our island. Now, sir, I want to make a further point that although we have these three factors that drive growth, sometimes there are initiatives that hit several of them in one shot. And the reason I was late arriving this morning is because the home ownership providing energy initiative that we've heard spoken of in the other place, this is affordable homes. Well, that broke ground on the first development in St. James in Lancaster this morning. And the Prime Minister was there, as well as the Board of Directors of Hope, and I'm a director, and the press and so on. And I'm sure we'll see more details of it in the news, but I wanted to speak of it a little bit. I know Senator Sands touched on this in his contribution, I think it was yesterday or the day before, affordable homes. This is not just building homes as we've done it in the past. The idea here is to build homes for low-income earners, and that is to say people who earn less than, this is the Homes Direct because there are two variants, but the Homes Direct is for people who earn less than $4,000 a month. What we have done is designed a product, first of all, that sits on between 3,500 and 4,000 square feet of land, a two-bedroom property of a minimum of 800 square feet that will cost, you will have to pay a mortgage of $800 a month for that. I'd suggest that's unheard of in the current market. When we did our market research, we saw that the nearest equivalent offered by the private sector was $268,000. Smaller house, smaller land. And you wonder, how is it that we've been able to design this and get it in place? And the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but I believe that we can hit those metrics. And how have we managed to do this? You know, Senator Grant said something yesterday that really resonated with me. He talked about the fear of failure. You mustn't have a fear of failing. And that fear sometimes stops us being innovative in initiatives. You know, there's a saying I've come across. I had a boss who mentioned to me, you know, it's okay to fail in a crowd, but the last thing you want is to fail by yourself. You know? And that is fear of failure. But we have a government who are prepared to take initiatives, prepared to try things. If it doesn't work, cut that quickly. And if it does work, continue with it. This policy is an example of that. When I say it's not how we build houses traditionally, what I'm getting at is it's easy to spend money. It's easy to give away the state's assets. What's not so easy is to do that in a way that is, in financial terms, self-perpetuating. That by building it, you can actually sweat the very asset you're building and construct new ones. So I'm struck by the asides, but I'll let it wash over me. So the trick here, if I can call it that, is that any given development, which represents between 175 and 200 houses, the deal is that in handing over these houses and creating those conditions, in effect giving land to the purchaser, in exchange, Hope Inc. gets rights to the roofs, and it puts photovoltaic panels on the roof that generate revenue. That's a good bargain. You know, people who they go to a bank now with nothing. It's hard to get a 100% mortgage. If you're earning less than $4,000, there's no way you can get this kind of deal. 4,000 square feet of land, 800 square foot house.
Yeah.
But Hope passes over the land as equity. So the loan that they take, the bankers are at ease. You might be borrowing 75, 76% of the total loan. The bank recognizes that the risk has been lowered and it's willing to enter into the transaction. And indeed, Hope Inc. has managed to negotiate with different lenders very preferential rates for buyers. At each stage of this process, Hope has used volume and its leverage, negotiating leverage, to lower fees, whether it's legal fees, to lower interest rates, borrowing rates, and so forth. Now, the revenue that's thrown off by those rooftops is enough to cover the land and the infrastructure on some of the developments. And in this way, we get a situation where the very fund that at the origin, which is only about $40 million, that covers just one development of about 200 houses. But thanks to the PV, that can be replenished, and you can go on, and you can go on. Now, there's an additional benefit here, and it's that those PV earnings can be, in financial terms, securitized, which basically means they're very high quality earnings. They're guaranteed, they're backed by something called a power purchase agreement over 20 years. The rate is firm. It's an ideal set of cash flows to transform into a savings instrument, a bond, if you like. And in this way, it should be possible to create a more liquid savings market. Democratization of capital is what we've been calling it. And where currently you may see, in fact, just this week I saw an announcement of a green bond deal, $40 million green bond deal, that already secured all the investors because it was people with money who were able to come up with $40 million. But here we're doing it a slightly different way. We will be in a position to offer savings instruments, perhaps in increments as low as $100. It's entirely up to us, knowing that the underlying cash flow revenue that's being generated is very safe and very secure. It's a very nice piece of financial innovation. And when you look at the prevailing saving rates in the market, I'll speak under correction here, but I think the best you can get is half of 1%. And that's before talking about any fees, credit union or banking fees. And that would be for a large amount of money, perhaps fixed over term. You might not be able to touch it for quite a long period of time. So there's a gap in the market, not just for affordable housing, but if you're able to knock over the next stump, also for savings instruments. Senator Rogers, in his contribution, mentioned Professor Oliver Headley, who of course I think would be, first of all, he's a pioneer when it came to matters of photovoltaics and solar energy. And I had to Google him last night for this piece of information, but he actually gave a presentation at the central bank, one of the presentations, called "The Sun Will Still Shine When the Oil Runs Out." Mm-hmm. This program recognizes that. You know, we cannot rely just on fossil fuel energy, whatever happens with our offshore exploration, and we have to find innovative ways of harnessing this for our benefit, not only for the benefit of foreign investors, but for our own financial and social benefit. A final piece of information on Hope. You know, the board and the management team have put in a lot of preparatory work on this, and it is our calculation that a single development of 700 or 800 houses can contribute 0.7% to GDP. Now that's one project that I see, that I'm involved in. And if the government is able to do similar projects in other areas, we can build out this bridge that we need to get to the point where tourist demand has come back, and even domestic demand, and businesses are able to open up again and provide their goods and services in the normal way. And these are houses, sir, just to emphasize that of a quality we haven't seen before. They are finished houses. You know, there's some in the private sector being offered that are not finished. You still have to do the tiles or put in the cupboards. They're large, relatively large, and they are hurricane resistant. You know, these are built to withstand Category 3 hurricanes. So not only do they cost more money and they're bigger and they sit on more land, but they fit in with the policy of building back a Barbados that in the unfortunate, hopefully won't happen soon event that we are struck by a hurricane, that we have a housing stock that can resist, that is replacing many of the houses built after Hurricane Janet with those flat roofs that a strong wind can actually blow over. No, sir, I pass on to a different subject now. I wonder, and I expect you have heard that German word Schadenfreude. You know, it's become relatively widely known in English, Schadenfreude, and it refers to the malicious pleasure that we can take in another's misfortune. You know, and there's a very interesting study that actually was studying football results, the reactions of fans to goals being scored. And it was noted that fans smiled more broadly when the opposition team scored an own goal. They just love that. That is Schadenfreude. And I thought of that during Senator Greenidge's contribution yesterday, when he spoke about the gleam of pleasure that he sees in some people's eyes when they talk about COVID and the challenges that COVID has wrought on our population. Because it's not just our government, it's our population. And I think he's right. I think some people do not realize the message that Senator Rogers and Senator Cummings have tried to transmit, that we're in this together. Whatever our origins, whatever we might think about equity in the country, we are in this together. And there's another German word, far not in common use, but I learned not that long ago, and it's Lebensluge. So I'm not a German speaker, but I think I got that right, Lebensluge. And this one now doesn't have a direct word-for-word translation, just like Schadenfreude, but it refers to a self-deception that permits one to live a delusional existence. And it's a very apt word, I think, for some of the characterizations of what we've heard, not just over these 3 days, but even prior to that. And the things that stick in my mind, and I wouldn't be true to myself, sir, if I didn't make these remarks. But the things that stick in my mind are when we hear that this government is being characterized as despotic. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. We sit in a chamber where we know the government needs a 2/3 majority to change the Constitution, and it doesn't have 2/3 of the votes in here. We have 12, 14 are needed. It's very hard, thank you, it's very hard to argue that that is a despotic system, and yet we hear it repeated over and over. I have heard that the government has deliberately delayed certain items of legislation in order to allow its friends to undertake corrupt practices, to fill their pockets before integrity legislation comes in. For example, I've heard that. Maybe others have heard that. Repeated over and over again, unsubstantiated. And yesterday, we heard that the government is negligent, criminally negligent in the way that it's carried out COVID. Now, that may be somebody's view. It's not substantiated. And it can be repeated over and over again. But it's not a description of Barbados that bears serious scrutiny. It simply is not. The kindest way to put it, sir, is that it is...
Point of order, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Franklin.
Senator Adams is misleading the Senate. I hear, just for the purpose of keeping the record clean, in case 100 years down the road people read that. He he said that someone said that the government is criminally negligent. I wasn't here all yesterday, and I didn't hear anybody say. I heard some person say that the government was negligent, and I think Senator Walker agreed. But I didn't hear anybody, because to accuse some person of a crime is a very serious thing. I'm on point of order already. You can't be on a point of order too.
But when he's finished point of order, we have your.
But dear man, you like to talk so much.
But you please address the chair. Senator Franklin, please
Sir,
address the chair.
I'm going to address the chair. You see, sir, Mr. President, ask him to behave and let me speak. You see, his problem is that he gets too angry.
Senator Franklin, please address the chair.
Yes, sir. Sir, I'm telling you, sir, that his problem is that he gets too angry, and when he gets angry, he jumps out. That is why he was replaced by the eagle-eared person.
You're not qualified to make a diagnosis. Please address the chair on the point of
Is
order.
it, sir? So the point of order, you know, he's a bit too eagle-eared too. So I don't want it said that anybody accused the government of a crime. When the government is accused of a crime, especially from this side, we will say so. But that didn't happen. So can I get him to withdraw it, sir?
Thank you, Senator Franklin. Senator Walker. Microphone, please.
He, on a point of order, the honourable member, when he got up unnecessarily so, he said that this honourable member had agreed with him when he said that the government was negligent. I would humbly ask that he be asked to withdraw that remark, because it did not happen.
Yes, Senator Franklin, yes, you withdraw that. We know that Senator Walker did not agree with you.
Sir, I apologize to Senator, but I thought when he claimed that the first diagnosis in the prison was the 26th, I thought he was referring to that being negligent, because it was, from my knowledge, the 16th, so they only knew from the 26th, so that was negligent. So if that is not what he's talking about, I withdraw.
Right. Still withdrawn. Senator Franklin did not agree. He had objected, and on the and on the other matter, on the criminal liability, I don't think you said criminal. So Senator Adams, you just withdraw the criminal aspect. You said, Senator Franklin said that the government was liable. The inference was there, not the word. But please withdraw the criminal and let us move on.
Mr. President, I'm more than happy to withdraw the remark. As you point out, I'll rephrase it. We heard several elements: that the government was negligent, that it was responsible through this negligence for several deaths, I think, since January. I'm happy to go and check the record. And you're right, the inference, to my mind, was there that kind of negligence should face the law courts. And I withdraw the remark if that wasn't the inference. But I have to admit that sometimes it's hard to know what the senator is inferring and what he's not inferring. But I would withdraw that one with pleasure, sir. But that is a great example of what I mean. If an inference is drawn, it's not the fault of the speaker. I think that is highly debatable. But, sir, my point in making these three, and there are more, that the government is despotic, that it's helping its friends, it's in very vague terms, there are these undefined friends who are corrupt. And by the way, it's also negligent for 40 deaths. You hear those things and you think, it's unbelievable, that someone can sit there and because they don't call a specific name and they just keep it to the government or the friends of the government, that somehow it is acceptable. I personally do not believe that is acceptable. And the danger, in my mind, is familiarity. You say these things often enough, they become familiar, they gain currency, and over time it's very hard to distinguish between what is familiar
On the point of order, sir.
and what is true.
What is your point of order?
So my point of order is that Senator Adams is misleading the Senate, and by so doing, he's misleading the people who are watching. He well knows, or should know, that you cannot call anybody's name in here unless we first pass it by you. And so if you are coming up in debate and a situation, you must not call the person's name because you did not bring it to the attention of the president to get permission. So you cannot do that. So when you say that people didn't do it, you're saying that people did not break the rules.
No point of order, Senator Franklin.
That's a very interesting interpretation. I mean, you stand up and say that we cannot call somebody's name, and then you explain how you can call somebody's name. So I didn't say that you would be breaking the rules, but I thank you for pointing out that it is possible, with the Speaker's permission, to set out a case using somebody's name. I don't know if you wish to rise again on that, because I'm inferring from what you just said what I think is correct. Thank you very much. So, sir, the underlying point is that what is familiar to us, what we hear over and over again, becomes difficult to distinguish from what is true. And I don't think we ever need that confusion introduced in this chamber. And we certainly don't need it introduced at a time of national crisis. You know, just because we're still carrying out our daily lives with a semblance of normalcy doesn't mean that we don't have an axe hanging over our heads. You know, and this kind of division, I believe, is not helpful. I go back to what Senator Reverend Rogers and Lisa Cummins used as their themes. Solidarity. You know, we're in this together. They said it in their unique ways, but this struggle is one that we're all fighting. So I support this bill, and I support that we embrace that spirit of solidarity, and I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Adams. Senator Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I rise to wrap up debate on this appropriation bill. I want to first of all thank all honorable members who contributed to this, especially those on this side, and indeed the others on the other side, with the possible exception of one aberrant entity that seemed to drift all over the place as it related to the matter that we were discussing. Indeed, the Honorable, I must mention, highlight Senator Crystal Drakes, who responded as the opposition spokesperson. And indeed, Mr. President, I think you would possibly agree with me that indeed she should be the principal spokesperson of the opposition, recognizing that oftentimes the person who carries that title or that designation seems to not know much about what is going on and seems to come in here believing that you can fly all sorts of rumors and make all sorts of false statements without any evidence. But again, that is his choice. Senator Drakes asked a number of questions, and I take note. The errors in the estimates document, I think it is something that we all recognize, and it is something that we need, as a government and a country, we need to deal with. It happens far too often. I believe for those of us who've been around for a while, we see these things happening, and I believe in the course of the next couple of weeks, you're going to see errata ad nauseum, and this has to be sorted out. She queried, Mr. President, under the financing, the category non-project financing. She said it was just $250 million, and she wasn't clear. And indeed, that has to do with the IMF SDRs, and that is where that is accounted for. She was concerned about the additional borrowing, the COVID borrowing, so to speak. And I'm here to tell you that it was necessary, she admitted that, but she was concerned about the possibility of getting into a debt trap. I believe the Senator Holder addressed this to some extent, but I would want you to know that we have been able thus far to obtain concessional interest rates, quite low interest rates, for example, the IMF of 1%. And you'll be well aware that a number of countries are engaging with the IFIs, trying to work on, and they already started discussions to convert this so-called COVID debt into long-term loans, 30 to 40 years. So we're very mindful of the concerns about this prolonged debt financing. The best program queries were raised, and I believe that these were addressed by Senator Cummins. The need for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to utilize the international agreements. This is being done. We've done a study to see how we sign these multilateral agreements, but how we make use of them thereafter. And that is a process that is going on. The NCF issues, those have been addressed by my colleague to my left, to my right. The energy plan, I agree, and we have recognized that the human resources is going to be a major factor going forward with that. As it relates to the budget documents and the information, the accompanying information for various ministries, your point is well made. Unfortunately, in our system thus far, Mr. President, the program budget documents and the outlines of the various ministries historically has been done by the government. And obviously the ministers have, and the technocrats have access to those documents. And it is not something that they're not, certainly not distributed widely. Although over the years, some of us have been able to find creative ways of obtaining those documents, Mr. President. I think you're well aware that some of us have been able to do it in spite of not being in government. And I believe that as the Honorable Senator spends more time away from her present colleague, that she would find ways, design ways of obtaining this information. But I take the point that it is very important that all citizens have access to all of the information. It certainly helps in good governance, and it is something that this government is committed to. So I will try to rally for you on your behalf. Senator Wiggins. Senator Wiggins, she spoke very well in support of the appropriation bill and the need for us to push greater self-cooperation, and she detailed us of her experience and experiences serving this country and extolled the virtues of rolling up your sleeves and working on behalf of the country and not piggybacking on nurses and trying to get them to come out on strike, or trying to cajole other persons from one union to come and join yours and perhaps to give, Mr. President, not yours of course, and to give him support. I must commend Senator Rogers and quoting Oscar Romero. This is something coming, I'm a Catholic, and I know you're not. So this was indeed pleasing to me. And I want to say, perhaps for all the members of the chamber, he has a very famous quotation where he said there are many things that can only be seen through the eyes that have cried. There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried. Okay? And I think at this point in time in Barbados, this is quite apt that with COVID, the devastation of COVID, we can come to appreciate what we have, what we need to cherish, etc. Senator Boyce, I was pleased to see, Mr. President, that he's made a metamorphosis. He's removed his political cloak, and he is now on that side, that group of persons, the intelligentsia, the modern intelligentsia who are sitting from the sidelines and is speaking in the third party, as a third party, not in the political type, but, they're observing. I'm pleased after all of his years in the political search, not wilderness, I almost said wilderness, but he was quite active in those days. So I'm pleased to see his transformation from a campaign manager, a canvasser, his father, Mr. President, you know his father, whoever he is, was well known for beating. Mr. President, before Mr. President, I will say that again. I want to commend all honorable members who spoke. I believe, with the one possible exception, they're all very constructive comments and ones that we take and we would utilize. And I know that my colleague on the other side, he means well in his heart of heart. He means well, but he is of that sort. I believe in medicine we would have termed him that kind of person that had some affliction, some malady of the gray matter. And it is something that we all get to. We get there, Mr. President. All of us will get there. But some get there sooner than others. Mr. President, I would like to thank all honorable members in this chamber for their contribution to this bill and for their support. I know not all of them support the appropriation bill. And I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Second time.
Sorry.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Oh, sorry. For the clerks, who was it? Senator McConnell was the seconder. Yes, they didn't hear you, Senator McConnell. I saw you, but they didn't hear you. Yes. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is, Senator McConnell, please be vocal in your seconding. Yeah. Yes. No, I'm seeing it, but they're backing you. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Appropriation Act 2021.
The question, seconder? Seconder. The question is?
Seconded.
Thank you. The question is that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Appropriation Act 2021. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now duly passed and so cited.
Mr. President, order number 4.
Order number 4.
In the name of the Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Amendment Bill 2021.
Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I rise to lead off debate on this bill, Drug Abuse and Prevention Control Bill, essentially it provides for the payment of a fixed penalty for persons found in possession of small quantities of cannabis or marijuana. I think all members in this chamber, I believe, as I look around, would agree that the time for a piece of legislation like this is long overdue. For several years, persons have been speaking about the laws against the use of drugs and even small quantities, and how persons are treated. By way of context, sir, I'd like to say that, first of all, within our region, the Caribbean, the use of cannabis and marijuana has deep historical, cultural, and indeed religious significance. And I believe that some members might know that it was really introduced to this region post-emancipation when the Indian indentured laborers or servants were brought here in around the 1850s, around 1850, 1854, especially to Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica, and Suriname. Indeed, sir, amongst the Hindus, cannabis was revered, and one of their Vedas described cannabis as a source of happiness, joy, and liberation. And it was often used in their religious ceremonies, while in our region, the Rastafarians, they regarded it as the holy herb, and that in fact it was a gift from God. Indeed, sir, for decades it was grown freely in the region, and some of us will be aware, certainly those of us who studied in Jamaica, of the use of bush tea, ganja tea for abdominal pain, for headaches, for asthma, if you wanted to sleep after studying for long periods of time and you wanted to sleep, that you would use this as a bush tea. Its designation as a dangerous drug apparently seemed to happen only around the 1913, for example, in Jamaica, when the opium law was passed there, and then subsequently in 1937 in the wider English-speaking Caribbean, when the dangerous drug ordinance was introduced in the UK. And there are some persons, I've discussed it with my honorable colleague on the other side, and he agrees that this was done, people feel, to stifle the competition for alcohol, especially the whiskey in the United Kingdom, which was just emerging from the whole process of prohibition. So there was this substance that gave the same reaction in the colonies and if that we had from alcohol. So if we are free in alcohol, then we need to stop this. And hence that illegal status started then. In spite, Mr. President, as you well know, of extensive controls, punitive measures, the use of cannabis has taken off globally. I believe in 2017, the World Drug Report stated that probably about close to 200 million people use cannabis. In this region, in spite of the draconian legislation over the years, the use of it just became, widespread. It just thrived. And certainly in this region, I believe it was Pt1 who did a number of studies in this area, and other studies come out of Jamaica, where there was feeling that you got the impression that throughout this region, people generally believed that anti-cannabis laws were ineffective, discriminatory, and unjust. And obviously they were failing to deter the use of cannabis. Some people said you heard of many arrests, imprisonments, and that in fact, and oftentimes, you were just wasting the law enforcement officers' time when they could be dealing with more serious crimes in the region. Indeed, in Barbados, figures for 2019 show that in magistrate, a significant time of the law enforcement officers and magistrates' court time is taken up with individuals with very small quantities of cannabis. And that was in 2019, that there were 4,295 drug or drug-related charges, and these were against 534 persons. They were minor cases, but they had to be investigated, they had to be processed, statements had to be taken, and of course then there was a trial. And it was felt that this is indeed time wasting, and oftentimes persons sentencing for these crimes are more severe than where there's a serious crime, serious victim. There's argued that persons can do serious crimes, indeed in some cases even a manslaughter. Persons are on remand, but you find that persons who are charged for small quantities of drugs, cannabis, can spend quite extensive time in being in incarceration. In addition, it is felt from studies, and I should mention at this time that the heads of government of CARICOM Commission back in 2015 or 16, CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana, and out of their work came the feeling that the prohibition, in fact, had led to these turf or gang wars, as it encourages the illicit market and encourages unsafe contaminated products with high tetrahydrocannabinol. And I know that Senator Rogers, this is his favorite ploy, because I remember last year when we spoke in a similar debate, urging us, Mr. President, to focus on hemp, which has a lower concentration, lower percentage of THC. It is recognized, of course, that cannabis has psychoactive negative effects on the brains, especially in adolescents. And it can affect them in terms of the memory, in terms of learning, and attention span. And there has been a link showed between adolescent use of cannabis and the development later on of early psychotic diseases. So it is something that we should continue, certainly in Barbados, to fight in terms of adolescents, to discourage the use of cannabis by adolescents in Barbados. And certainly not recommended by children, except for medical use. And those who are familiar, in some children who have seizure disorders, epileptic seizure disorders, it is felt to be very useful in some cases, even when conventional medicine is not applicable. But certainly, apart from that, it should not be used in children. And the purpose of this bill is certainly to speak to that, to the avoiding the use in children. Mr. President, we believe, and we've done similar legislation, that this is part of the process. The government is committed to, if there's going to be total decriminalization of marijuana, it would be via a referendum. But we still believe that there's still financial benefits to come from the regulation of medical marijuana and the use of medical marijuana. Indeed, is also the possibility and using it in terms of wellness tourism industry. Other countries have already embarked in this level. Again, I'm simply saying that the time has come for us to move forward, as it was, in terms of persons who have possession of small quantities. The proposed bill speaks to quantities no under 14 grams of cannabis and speaks to, rather than charging these people, that they are given, and this is explained in section 6, the issuing of a certificate and a payment of $200. It speaks to the time in which they have to do this. It speaks to the fact that if you're under 18, that rather that you will be assessed to be sent to have counseling, etc., from the designated entity, the National Council on Substance Abuse, and this is in the schedule to the bill. It speaks to that. Of course, it also lists the whole process as related to the payment of the fixed penalty and those who don't abide by that, and if you don't pay in the specified time, the bill speaks to the payment of a fine of $1,000 or being summarily convicted. It also speaks at section 6B to the expungement of convictions, and this speaks to a person who was convicted for the offense of possession of not more than 14 grams of cannabis, who had served a sentence, whether custodial or non-custodial, that they would be deemed to be rehabilitated, and your conviction should be deemed to be expunged, because there are a number of persons these days, young people, bright people, who've been caught with a spliff or whatever and were charged, and in trying to get jobs, this requirement in Barbados of, I think the other member from the other side knows it very well, the certificate that you need. I don't remember the name of it. I think he certificate of character, I believe it is. It speaks to that, and these things act against them. And so that we are trying to deal with this. We are not saying that it is free time that anyone can do as they like as it relates to cannabis and marijuana. We are saying that small quantities, that rather than utilizing the resources, which are scarce at most times in terms of law enforcement, that we can deal with these individuals at the point in time, and recognizing that there are benefits for the use of cannabis, and there are recognized medical benefits, and indeed in the future, hopefully in this country, we would reap some financial benefits from a medical marijuana and the use of medical marijuana. Mr. President, with those few words, I beg that this bill be now read. A second.
Senator Franklin. Thank you, Senator Walker. Senator Franklin.
Thank you, sir. I shall be brief. Senator, I shall be brief. Sir, if you look at my note, I usually write bullet points, what I want to speak on. And my first bullet point is commend government for section 6B. And that is the only positive thing about this bill. You know, the section 6B, sir, says, notwithstanding the provisions of the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, Cap 127A, a person convicted for the offense of possession of not more than 14 grams of cannabis, who has served a sentence, whether custodial or non-custodial, A, shall be deemed to be rehabilitated, and B, his conviction shall be deemed to be expunged. That is where Senator Walker ends, and I think that's the most important aspect of this bill in terms of a lot of young men in this country. You know, I'm sure all the people, the men in here were young at once. They might have been tempted to try certain things. some of the ill-advisedly in some cases. Sometimes, well, you know, young men will do things. Some make mistakes. And I do not think that the mistake, or if you wish, of using a drug that can harm your mind, because Senator Walker just admitted that in adolescence, I wrote it down, it can cause some problems for adolescents. So adolescent use is discouraged. So usually young men are adolescent, you know. So it should not be encouraged. But as these adolescent boys or young men or whatever they are, see other people using the marijuana, cannabis, or they get tempted, and people say it opens your mind. I always found that I got my mind open when I read a good book. But you know, sometimes I find myself sitting down reading, and next thing you know, I see the sun coming up. But my mind was completely open. I didn't even shut my eyes the whole night. But people rely on marijuana to do that, but I have found from books. Well, to each his own. But sir, my problems with this bill now. I say the positive part is Section 6B, where you're going to rehabilitate all of those young people who made mistakes, some foolishly, and some of them, to my certain knowledge, ended up at the psychiatric hospital, because I had gone and looked for some of them. And I remember going down there to visit my members, you know, and I saw a young man who grew up with me. I hadn't seen him for a number of years. And he was down there, a shell of what he used to be. And all he used to do, as he said, was smoke a little spliff. But no, that's you know, you see, people tell me that sometimes people spike them with some other things else and whatever else. But he used to, and all he knew, he used to smoke a spliff. He was a patient then, and I think he died in there. We grew up together. That hurt me. Man dribbling. I'm like, I can't take it. So this is what happened to some people. It will not happen to every person. Look, even with the harder drugs, some people take cocaine. And one shot of cocaine, boom, your heart bursts. And you're gone. People taking it for years, snorting all over the place, and nothing happens to them. So when you have something that is so unpredictable, you try to stay away from it. Like, I take one of those low dose aspirin things, and I heard that, you know, the dengue in the air, I stopped taking them because they get scared. I always get scared when it comes to medical things. But no, I am in between minds now, because I read an article yesterday that says that in Israel, low dose aspirin will reduce the symptoms of COVID, much like what you want to do with the vaccine. So I think I'm going to take the aspirin as opposed to the vaccine. But that's another matter. This bill, sir, is a result of what happens when politicians make promises to get votes. And in some cases, they make promises to the people who we know to be the criminal element in the society. And I say this without fear of contradiction by anybody, because at the opening of Parliament, the state opening of Parliament after the general election, the police were able to identify some of the specially invited guests as drug men. Because you only could get a permission to come in here if you were specially invited. And some of I don't know who invited them. And I know you telling me you were not elected, you pointed at me, so you didn't get nobody to invite. But those people were recruited into the campaign of the Barbados Labour Party to assist in getting out the vote. And this is their reward.
Senator Franklin, I think you're really trespassing on breach of the standing orders here. Standing orders do not permit, or they forbid imputing improper motives to members of either house. And you cannot stand here and make an allegation that members of these two houses recruited with criminal element and so on and so on. Please withdraw that. You have it struck from the record and move on. Let us stick to the bill, please.
Sir, I never said any member of this house or the other one. I said members of the Barbados Labour Party.
There are members of
the Barbados Labour Party has a lot of members.
And Senator Franklin, be guided by the chair.
Sir, I will take your guidance, and I will say to you,
Senator Franklin, speak, please take your seat. Be guided by the chair. Let's have a good debate. There's a place to make the point you want to make, and it is not here. This is not the sum total of where you can speak. And simply say when you're here, speak to the matters relevant to this debate, and you have to control the allegations that you make when you're speaking here. Let us, there's a place for that. And there will come a time for that. Withdraw the remarks, let us move on, please.
Sir, strike it because that is my opinion. So he agrees now? Because I am saying that those persons who I was told, because I didn't know them, they're not my friends. Up to now I can't identify any of them. I don't mix with that type of people. But I am told by no less the persons than the police who were providing security for us at Parliament when Parliament first opened, that some of the persons there, they were offended by it, were persons who they arrest and have to bring them before the courts all the time. I know they're there protecting them. All right? And then I found out who they were, and some of them have been before the courts for drugs and a lot of other things. That is a fact. That is not a supposition. Well, I don't know about that. I can only speak about what I do. And I'm saying, sir, that in my opinion, this is payback. That's my opinion. Yesterday you told me that I can use my opinion. That's the opinion that I have. If it is not so, then persuade me otherwise. But so far, I believe it. I believe with all my being, every sinew in my body, that is the case. That this is a trade-off. And you cannot come back to the people of this country again for another vote unless you do this. Because those people who are waiting to get their splits up free will say, look, we voted the last time because we thought that you were going to give us the thing, you legalize the thing. So we ain't voting no more. So this has to be brought here and now. I go to the markets on a regular basis. I go to the fish market. Sir, I'm not going to call any names. I'm not even going to call a gender. One of the vendors that I buy fish from said to me one day, and I'm not calling any name, Mr. Franklin, I know you don't like so-and-so, but that person is my boy or girl, and I don't mean what you said, because the other night I was in a party and I was bouncing, and I feel somebody bouncing next to me, and when I looked back, the body took my spliff and gave it a pull and gave me back. He says, let me tell you something. That person, that's my person. I'm not saying name of anybody's name. He said, that's my person. He said, which one of them other ones would do that to me? Fred isn't going to do it. This person is a good person. To pull my spliff. You don't pull it too? No, I never spelled spliff yet. So that person, that element is saying that you are a good person. He was talking about a political person. And he said that, look, he can support these people because Frandil would never do that to these. So this person is a good man, or a good woman, or a good man, or whoever it is. I don't know who you're talking about. But that is an experience that I had. And I had to try to convince that person without any success that pulling your spliff is just a way to get into you and get your vote. But they don't mean you any good, because if they were, they should tell you that this spliff is harmful to your health. Right? But what do? We using mindless young men, mostly, to get elected. So we promised them we can legalize this thing.
Senator Franklin, you're trespassing on all types of things in standing orders. Relevant one, but also you're really going down the line again of imputing improper motives to members of either house. That is explicitly against the standing orders. The objects and reasons, the objects of the bill are clearly stated. It is part of law reform to have fixed penalties for small quantities of cannabis, not legalization. And but you are going down the line of saying that these things were promised by politicians in exchange for a vote, which to me would be improper. One is not supposed to offer any inducement, in fact illegal, offer any inducements. Don't go that line, please. Make your point, but stay within the four walls of the standing orders.
Sir, I'm guided by you, and I looking forward to my next speech about the corruption, because I'm going to talk about that aspect. So I'm going to. But what I am saying to you, sir, is, and if I appear to be making any allegations against any member of Parliament, Senate or the House, I have not done so. I have made allegations against members of the Barbados Labour Party, and every member of the Barbados Labour Party is not here. And I have been a member of the Barbados Labour Party, and I have been out there and I have canvassed for votes, and I've never made those kind of promises to anybody. So I am not. So you can say, well, that Casper made promises too, and I have. So I am not speaking to any particular politician. As a matter of fact, sir, when I spoke, I said I'm not going to call any names. I'm not even going to call a gender. All I am going to say is that this fellow approached me and said that I don't like this particular politician, but this body's pulled his spliff. And I know it wasn't the then Prime Minister, because he said that Frandl will never do that. So, but this person did. I ain't calling nobody name. I ain't calling nothing.
But Senator Franklin, in purporting to explain, you're repeating.
So,
Repetition is not elucidation. And all I'm saying to Senator Franklin, you know, let us move on.
I support one section of it, but that's not bad for me. But I'm going to ask the question, how do you rationalize making the growing, possession, and sale of large quantities of cannabis under the guise of medical marijuana, and then an eminent doctor in this body, I would trust my life with him. So I know when he tells me that it damages the mind, and then, especially in young people, then they don't understand what that same eminent doctor that I would trust my life with.
Senator Franklin, I hate to interrupt you. Be guided by me. To say that permission is being granted to grow large quantities of cannabis under the guise of medical cannabis is in fact suggesting that the legislation as put up there that says medical cannabis, and there is a scientific difference between the cannabis that is used for medical purposes and that which is used for pleasure. You can scientifically identify it. If something is done under guise, it means that there was not transparency, it was a trick. And all I'm saying is that it would not be in keeping with the standing orders to accuse the members of the two houses who passed the legislation of doing it under a guise. You want to withdraw that and
Of
press
course.
on with your argument in another way, but not under guise.
Sir,
Medical
sir,
cannabis is medical cannabis, and that is what was agreed. Cannabis for pleasure and heightened THC was not included in that legislation or legal definition.
sir, I apologize for the use of the word guys then.
Thank you.
Pretext, that'd be better.
No.
I was just checking.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Senator, you know better than that.
I'm just checking if I call
You
it,
know better than
I gotta put a word in there. And I'm
You-
just looking
you-
there
you-
for one.
You can achieve what you want to achieve for breaching the standing orders.
So I didn't think I was. I said, I always endeavor not to break any of these standing orders, you know. It's sometimes, you see, as I told you yesterday, I was saying pretext, I was saying guys, and I said, well,
It's
let me use one of the
just
other.
your exuberance and passion getting ahead of you.
Yes.
So calm
You
down
could
and
be
let
right.
us proceed.
But I'm not high.
Not at all.
You know, so I'm saying if you, for whatever reason, you legalize large quantities of marijuana, and then you penalize persons for small quantities, I don't understand the rationale behind it. Because I'll give you an example. Sugarcane is legal. But large quantities, and if they see me with a small quantity, they ain't gonna prosecute me. But why do you choose not to prosecute me for a small quantity of sugarcane, but you can prosecute me for a small quantity of marijuana? You know the business behind that is that the small quantity is mind altering and sugarcane is not. So you know that something is wrong with marijuana when people ingest it. And we are coming to satisfy a constituency, a group within your things that want this thing done. And we come up with some idea that if you take it is 40 grams, if the police find you in possession of 40 grams of cannabis, they can issue you with 14 grams, yes. 14 grams. It's 16 grams is an ounce, right? So it's a bit less than an ounce. Let's say I'm a policeman, and I saw a fellow down the road with a spliff. I can say, hold it, son, let me wear that. And when he wears it, he says, it is 16 grams. My spliff burning, you know. The police issues me with a ticket and tell me I have to pay this fine or whatever will happen to me. I take the ticket from him, and what do I do? Out the spliff or continue smoking? I don't know. But who says that the policeman is qualified to identify cannabis? Is he an analyst? Is he going to be walking around in his pocket with a kit to put the drug in to determine that it's cannabis? How is the policeman know that that's cannabis? Like, for instance, they got some people that smoke other things. Suppose I like to smoke barefoot leaf or thyme, right? And the police see me with these things crush up, and I smoking some. He issued me with a ticket. I go to court and I tell the judge or the magistrate, sir, but I ain't had no marijuana. How is the police to know under this legislation, and how is anybody to know? So you can't how are you going to convict a fellow that said he had marijuana when he's now saying I did it? Because by the time you get to court, it's split, burn up, and gone. So you cannot now come and say we can test it. So how is this going to work? I don't understand how it's going to work. You issue me with a ticket. A policeman issues a person with a ticket. Sir, you going to protect me right here?
I wasn't hearing him.
So
I suggest that you don't either.
Okay. It's good that you don't hear me though. You issue me with a ticket. I take the ticket. And I take the ticket and ball it and put it in my pocket. You know that's an offense too? How you give me a document? It's my document. I can do what I like with it. But this legislation says, somewhere here, I read it somewhere here, that if you mutilate the thing, it is a penalty, a fine of $1,000 or something like this. Yes, a person who defaces, destroys, or mutilates a notice referred to in subsection 1 is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $1,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 1 month. Not like locking up people too bad, you know. You give me a ticket. It's my ticket. Let's say I agree that I can pay the fine and I can go to the magistrate court and tell them about it. Look, my name in the book there, so if police got a fine for me, let me pay the fine. I can ball it, you think I put it in my pocket, ball it, where's mine? So how is that an offense and why is it an offense? Why does it make sense to criminalize some person who get vexed one day because he got in and ball it up? I could ball it up and then I could do so that and straighten it back out too. So why is that an offense? Why look, you just decided that you're going to take away some minor offenses from people, then want to create another minor offense? To do what? That doesn't make sense. But let me get back to the identifying the breadfruit leaf, or the thyme, or Bonavis. You say you do the banana leaf? I tried Bonavis when I was a little boy, you know? And when I like the thing, all I can ask behind my mouth. You know? You know, so Fred, tell me. But you've heard that people smoke other stuff. Yeah, man, we have Bonavis manifest and may go, say, we cut up, break off a little piece, and you go and light it, and we go this and smoke it off and thing. And luckily, that is not habit forming, or I don't think it did anything to the morning, at least not to my thing, but other people might say otherwise. But I didn't do it often. You know, it is one of the things where you see, what people used to call you a force-right fella. You know, so you want to be a man and you go and smoke a little spliff, or you smoke and my days with Bonavis vine, you know, and you criminalize them. So that's why I say I am glad that you took off those offenses from some people because they can't get jobs, you know. You work quite right, Senator Walker. Some people cannot get jobs. I know of a case where a fellow used to work on a cruise ship. And I was in the court today, and the magistrate said, look, because you work on a cruise ship, I'm not going to record a conviction against you. But you would have destroyed your life or live. You're a fool or what? And I said to myself, that master is a wise man. He's no ombudsman. But he had the kind of compassion that we wish that magistrates have today. But some of the magistrates are young and green and didn't ramble the street with me and didn't understand. They don't understand life. So they get just look at the law and lock up people. And next thing I can tell you about that you're locking up people for, I can teach you a lesson and remind you. That is not one of the grounds for remanding anybody, as far as I read in the legislation. You can lock up a fellow and tell you, that's to teach you a lesson. No. If you're going to give him bail, there are conditions for giving bail. And what the Muslim is that he will come back to court. And if you believe that you can come back to court, give him bail. You don't have to lock him up. Maybe that fellow will be living today. But I say no more on that. But my concern, sir, is why this legislation and why it is done in such a shoddy manner, because it doesn't make sense, right? Yeah, when I scratched it, and he said, what nonsense is this? That's what I wrote in my note on this thing about the fine. I don't understand what's going on. I would like somebody to explain to me. The principal person who spoke for the government on this bill, he didn't explain it to me. He talked about 1937 and everything else. But I did not get from him any good reason why this is done. Now, let me get to the children who are under 18. You say if the police can determine that you can go to Verdun. Now, are we now employing analysts, psychiatrists, and as policemen, and so just starting at the wrong salary scale? When you put all this work on the police, now you gotta give them more money. Because now you're requiring them to have additional skills that wasn't part of their remit when they join up, you know. So you should be looking to give them a little bit more change for now acting as analysts, psychiatrists, because it says the police can actually police determine that you are an addict or something like that, or you try to remember these things. You're addicted, that you can say, how is he on a chance meeting with me? Know that I'm addicted. Everybody drunk back there. So you are putting too much responsibility on the police to do work that they're not qualified for. So this piece of legislation is bad, it's flawed, it's not sensible. I think you should reel and come again, sir. This has already been admitted that it damages minds. The leader of government business said that, adolescent minds. So why are you going to allow something up there to your certain knowledge will damage adolescent minds? Because right now, at my age, I'm not looking to find out any lot of new things and try all these new things. I already tried what I wanted to try, and I like them, and I can stick with them. But young people who are now still searching for an identity, who are still trying to find out new things, you can't put them in harm's way or cannot put harm in their way for them to fall upon it. So this bill does not help the situation. We will end up with a lot of young people at the psychiatric hospital. This is not necessary. It is not sensible, not prudent. It is vote catching. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Rogers? Oh, okay.
Mr. President, it's 1:45. It's 1:45.
Oh, it's that time of day. I'm sorry.
I beg to move that this sitting be now suspended
I was now getting into it.
2:45.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:45 p.m. today. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting is now suspended until 2:45 p.m. today.